Tonight, Boya braces to host the 23rd edition of the Mount Carmel Race of Hope amidst tight security. It is taking place at the time when the peace and the security of the entire region is under constant threat as a result of what has become the Anglophone problem. Also ahead, tens of houses in Rumde Aja, Garwa northern region of Cameroon residents rendered homeless after their houses were demolished. We tell you why in this newscast. We also talk politics to get more youths registered ahead of future elections in Cameroon is a big problem to Elekam officials in the economic capital Douala. Youths are simply complaining that they do not have confidence in the electoral system in Cameroon. Those are headlines. We shall be right back. Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you so much for joining us in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on Equinox Television. We take you right away to the Southwest Regional Headquarters of Boya. Cameroon's Minister of Sports and Physical Education, Pierre Ismail Binumpat, has officially launched the 2018 edition of the Mount Carmel Race of Hope that was today in that part of Cameroon. Few hours to the event, preparations are upbeat in Boya amidst tight security, as Derek Jato tells us in the following report.
If to the 2018 Mount Carmel Race of Hope. After you must have left the comfort of the tower, meet Madame Lyonga. She is along the corridor to the summit of the mountain, born and bred on the foot of this mountain. What Madame Lyonga can only remember is the good old days of Mount Carmel Race of Hope.
As I do also, so I do see the mountain race there. Plenty. Well, for that time, mountain race did they fight. For now, mountain race no fun. People they complain about water plenty. For good live water. If they not get water for good live. Mountain race those poor no be naive will be know that time.
In under 12 hours, this track will be as busy as a beehive. And on the other hand, preparations are intensifying.
We try to clean up the area. You see me, I see me colossal. My work will be the work since morning time for see me keep everything clean.
How are you?
Okay, so that any man not get no wound or thing could be fine.
People will come down and other them go up with bags.
These boys, for instance, are porters that left with water to the mountain for the athlete and other materials for the members of the Athletic Federation. And to them, everything is just okay for the race.
I come from the mountains. You can see tomorrow is a mountain race of hope, so we have to do water for the mountain. The road is cleared, they have burned it, burn all the dead.
At Moliko Stadium, the Cameroon Minister of Sport and Physical Education, Mr. Ismail Bidumkwat, just arrived and launched the ceremony. Security was heavily beefed up with multiple checkpoints. The town of Boya in general has witnessed an influx for the race.
That was Boya. Few hours to the 2018 edition of the Mount Carmel Race of Hope. An estimated 500 athletes from Cameroon and beyond are bracing to climb and descend the second tallest mountain in the African continent. The 23rd edition of the Race of Hope, the 2018 edition of the Mount Carmel Race of Hope, is taking place when peace and security in the region, as I indicated, are constantly being threatened by the Anglophone crisis. The national president of the Athletic Federation, Emmanuel Motombi Mbome, has however reassured that Boya is combat ready to host the event hitch-free. The major innovation this year is the electronic scoreboard, which would be used for the first time amongst the 500 athletes to take part. 19 are foreigners from other African countries, that is Europe, as well as Australia. And let's now have an excerpt of the National President of the Athletic Federation, Mr. Emmanuel Motombi Mbome, was speaking to Derek Jato as to how Boya is ready ahead of tomorrow's event. Take a listen.
are going to run the race with an electronic chronometer. You know, high-level performance athletes usually run with stopwatches. A stopwatch can fail you. And this other motivating factor which we instituted this time, to give consolidated prizes to the first athletes to the various heads right to the summit in both male and female category. The first athlete backed home 10 million francs, the second athlete 5 million francs, and the third athlete 2.5 million francs. Last year it was 2 million.
And the weekend is going to be charged with several sporting activities ranging from athletics to soccer. The Mount Cameroon Race of Hope is going to be taking place in Boya, while the Eding Football Club of Lekki and New Stars of Douala would be on continental assignments. Simanjik and Gabriel projects the highlights of the major sports event this weekend in the following report.
Attention will be directed towards the Moliko Omnisport Stadium in Boya as the 23rd edition of the Race of Hope will come up this Saturday with over 400 athletes taking part. The race this year is peculiar owing to the continuous tension that has been caused by the Anglophone crisis. The overall winners in both men and women's category will back home 10 million francs CFA. Elsewhere in football, New Stars of Douala are in Equatorial Guinea to challenge Deportivo Namfang in the return leg preliminary match of the CAF Confederations Cup. In the first leg, New Stars picked up a 2-1 victory, while in the CAF Champions League, Eding Football Club of Lekki has a difficult task ahead as they confront Plateau FC of Nigeria, a club that humbled them 3-0 in the first leg game at Jos. For Eding to qualify, they have to defeat Plateau at least 4-0. The clubs in the Elite 1 Championship will also be called up to duty this weekend as the league goes into match day 3. Apart from the New Stars versus Eding encounter that has been pushed forward to a date to be announced, the other 14 clubs will be in action. 7 matches will be played on Sunday, while the Coton versus Apejes encounter will be played on February 20. Freche FC of Banjul tops the league's table with 6 points after 2 playing days, while New Stars, still to play a single game since the start of the championship, are first from the bottom with no points.
And surrounding residents of Rumde Aja, a neighborhood in Garwa North region of Cameroon, have been rendered homeless. The inhabitants were victims of destruction that took place along the street of Rumde Aja. Authorities of Garwa City Council who carried out the act say that it is aimed at cleaning the area that is leading to the stadium that would be hosting some of the matches as far as the 2019 African Cup of Nations to be hosted by Cameroon is concerned. Let's now get the reaction of an official who spoke to a correspondent in the North region of Cameroon.
Important and necessary to displace population and to be ready in the demolition, and at the end for this operation we will be ready for the event, and I advise some people to cooperate with authorities to maintain this operation safety.
And calm has returned to Kishong and Kitiwum as well as other surrounding villages in Kumbo of the Bui division in the northwest region of Cameroon. That is after a fierce confrontation between security forces and unknown armed civilians that left at least 2 persons severely injured. The 2 injured victims are a retired soldier who was beaten and the first assistant police officer in Biame that is still in the Kumbo of the Bui division of Cameroon that was reportedly shot. That is according to a reporter in Kumbo that is based there. He has so far confirmed that the secretary of the retired military, who is a PTA chair, was picked up and later found lifeless. In Kitiwum, the streets were deserted shortly after the incident. A relative calm, it should be noted, has returned to the localities and other parts of Kumbo of the Bui division in the northwest region of Cameroon. We now talk politics. Many young Cameroonians that have so far remained pessimistic and lacking interest in the registration exercise as far as upcoming elections in Cameroon are concerned. They say that they are disappointed with the Biya regime. This is why Elections Cameroon officials are devising other strategies to get as many of them as possible registered on the electoral list. Markets and other areas of population concentration here in the economic capital Douala have so far been targeted by the various Elecam officials. Details with Babla Jonathan.
Officials of Elections Cameroon breaking new grounds in the mad hunt for potential voters ahead of elections constitutionally scheduled for this year in Cameroon. They stormed the Independence Square in the Douala Central Market with assistance from a non-governmental organization registering Cameroonians of voting age. The strategy is yielding some fruits, like this woman, many who had never registered and consequently have never voted before now have their names on the electoral list. Political parties are the first beneficiaries of the voter registration exercise. It is of course a civic duty of citizens, but the result of an election is first of all profitable to the politicians. So we urge the politicians to step up efforts as far as this exercise is concerned. Since the voter registration started January 2, 2018, 3,000 potential voters have been registered in the Douala 2 subdivision.
And Cyril Ramaphosa is to deliver his State of Nation address. We are news out of Cameroon, which is a very significant event in South Africa's political calendar. In his first presidential speech that was yesterday, the 65-year-old pledged to tackle corruption that has so far rocked the government of President Jacob Zuma. Cyril Ramaphosa became president a day after the embattled Jacob Zuma resigned from PAM, and it should be noted that yesterday is actually expatiated on his plan of action as far as the political, social and economic domains in South Africa are concerned. Let's hear him in the following excerpt.
I'd like to thank all the members of this assembly. I thank you for the honor that you bestow on me by electing me to this position. I truly feel humbled to have been given this great privilege of being able to serve our people. I also want to extend my gratitude to the leaders of political parties who are here, as well as the media. This for me is a truly humbling occasion. Soon, once I'm sworn in, one of the things that I will be seeking to do is to have an opportunity which I started doing when I was appointed Deputy President. I will seek to work with all political parties, and we'll start it off with wanting to have a meeting with the leaders of all political parties so that we can try and find a way of working together. And I'm heartened by some of the sentiments expressed here about working together, which I will want to touch on. And I will do all this as a servant of our people, and I'll seek to execute that task with humility, with faithfulness, and with dignity as well. That is what I will seek to do. Many of you have spoken about unity, you've spoken about patriotism, you've spoken largely about how we can all work together to improve the lives of our people. That has a great deal of resonance with I believe in and what I intend to do. Let us deal with the current moment and work together on how we're going to improve the lives of our people rather than grandstanding, rather than standing on big platforms. That's all I want to say. Issues of how we can straighten out our state-owned enterprises and how we deal with state capture are issues that are on our radar screen. Those are issues that we're going to be addressing, and tomorrow we will also have an opportunity to outline some of the steps that we are going to be taking by talking about patriotism and how we can work together to put our country first. When our people look at this parliament, they see themselves represented, and they don't want to see disorder, they don't want to see poor levels of debate, they want to see debates that are going to lead to the improvement of their lives. Let us rise to that occasion.
And in the second part of this newscast, we talk about the rise and fall of Jacob Zuma, the new political face in South Africa. How significant is it to Cameroon? That is going to be a debate tonight. Stay with us. We shall be right back. And to talk about it, we have a historian as guest, Mr. Gindo Gibet. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Talking Point.
Thank you, Mimi. It was a pleasure being with you here, and good evening to all Equinox televiewers. I'm glad to be here to talk especially about a regime that has called attention to the whole world, and today there is a change that is meaningful to every country in the world, and Cameroon in particular. Thank you very much.
A change within the regime. We are still talking about the same party, the African National Congress in South Africa. Many are curious to know, Mr. Gindo Gibert, how a ruling party could succeed to remove its own president. That's the curiosity about it.
Well, that's not the first time. It is not the first time the ruling party is removing president. It happened when Mandela in 1994 gave the throne to Thabo Mbeki, because, you know, from 1990, February 1990, when apartheid officially came to an end following the release of Mandela and the organization of pluralistic elections organized in South Africa between the political parties and the inclusion of the blacks, it was already a road junction in the history of that country. Road junction in that the inclusion of the blacks were a majority meant that things were supposed to turn around. And we must know that by then there was already a line that was drawn up. That line that was drawn up had to do with anti-apartheid activists who had already drawn up a line. From those who were fighting from Mandela down to Thabo Mbeki, Oliver Tambo, whose son was Thabo Mbeki. From then we come down to Jacob Zuma, and then Ramaphosa. I want to remind that in 1990, when Mandela was coming out from prison, Cyril Ramaphosa was already so popular in South Africa than Mandela, who was coming out of prison. But the issue here is that, one, he was still very young and could not be able to pilot South Africa and resolve the existing and mounting conflicts between the blacks and the black majority and the white minority, because the whites were not believing themselves what Frederick William de Klerk was doing. First, he decided to release Mandela. Two, he decided to organize multi-party elections and free elections, including the blacks, something that they did not expect it to occur between themselves. So, somebody like Ramaphosa, in 1990, was not only young, but South Africans were, black South Africans were doubting if he could be able to tackle those impending problems. And that is why these activists met together and decided to sideline him momentarily by handing over MTN, which was just created to him. He became the general manager of MTN, with the South African black government carefully pumped finances into MTN and sat him there, so that with time, those people who had been working for anti-apartheid moves could be able to at least work for South Africa for some time. That's why we have Mandela, who worked for South Africa, withdrew. We have Thabo Mbeki, who worked for South Africa, and when Jacob Zuma came up and was elected chairman of the African National Congress, he simply, in order to make Thabo Mbeki get Thabo Mbeki out of power, withdrew his support for him. And that's exactly what Ramaphosa has done for Zuma. It is simple. It is a continuation of the democratic process in South Africa. It should not look shocking to any person, because in South Africa, within the ANC, that is a process evolving.
What does the African National Congress stand to gain by getting rid of Jacob Zuma?
The first thing is that they stand to gain by weeding out somebody whose status quo, whose portfolio was not even worthy for South Africa as we talk now. We are in the 21st century. Somebody like Jacob Zuma, who's first of all civilization intellectual level, that's somebody who openly engages himself into sexual scandals. And these are not people who are supposed to rule emerging nations now. This is somebody who gets into corruption scandals, who gets himself into squabbles with youths like Julius Malema. He gets himself into some kind of reforms which are uncalled for with the status that South Africa has in front of the world now. So I feel that every Cameroonian, every South African has his own opinion. But my own opinion is that South Africans will feel free now to bring in somebody who understands the fundamental problems that South Africa has now, fundamental problems that the ANC in particular has now, to be able to continue to reconcile, because it has not ended. Reconciliation has not ended in South Africa. They have to continue to reconcile themselves with the whites, and continue to see how a united South Africa can henceforth be established from 1990, when apartheid came to an end and the blacks the whites minority decided to isolate themselves and form a party which unfortunately, due to minority, cannot come to power as of now.
Of course, you have mentioned that it's not the first country in Africa. We saw just a few months ago the situation of Zimbabwe with the ZANU-PF party of Robert Mugabe. You see, can such a thing happen in French-speaking African countries?
Well, it has to do with the designation of the government, and you see, in French Africa, what French African territories lack is decolonization. We know that from 1960s, decolonization started resorting to the independence of African states. But the issue is that French African countries might have ascended to independence, but what they lack now is that decolonization of the brains, decolonization of the psychology, and most importantly, sovereignty. Because there is a difference between independence and sovereignty. Independence is when the whites, the Europeans, could surfacely declare that you are no longer under their direct government, but you continue to be under their oppression, you continue to be under their suppression.
That is what is happening.
Sovereignty comes in now to explain that a situation whereby when you break up from a former colonial master, you are able to decide on your own, economically, socio-culturally, and most importantly, politically. If you are able, if the people in French or former French Africa are capable of determining who has to rule them, who has to direct their destiny, that's what we call sovereignty. And unfortunately, that is what former French Africa lacks as we talk now.
Now, in the case of Cameroon, do you see this as a lesson to Cameroonian politics today?
Unfortunately, Cameroon
happened in South Africa.
Cameroon happened not to have been a former French colony. It was a former French mandated territory and a former French trust territory. But it has metamorphosed into something which politically, economically, and socio-culturally is not understandable, because when you look at Cameroon now, the multi-ethnic nature of Cameroon now has made it some sort of unnecessary adherence to the party in power, unnecessary adherence to the ethnic group from where the president comes from, so much so that all other multi-ethnic groups in Cameroon now turn to pledge their submission to a particular group that holds the country hostage in the name of government.
But do you think that the CPDM can, at this point in time, is it possible that the CPDM can choose another person as its presidential candidate?
I always heard it that if the CPDM ventures into choosing another person, one thing is very clear there. The head of state, the president, Paul Biya, who doubles as chairman of that party, has to stand ahead. if he stands ahead to choose somebody, either through preliminaries like the democratic process within political parties holds, then he has to give that person a cover. Because if he does not give, it is going to result into internal wrangling within that political party. That is very clear. If he does not. Now, on the other way around, if President Biya allows it that the CPDM himself is fetch out the person who has to represent, become the presidential candidate of the CPDM, I assure you, that party is going to transform, like I told you last time, into a basket of crabs, where everybody will bite the friend and nobody will be allowed to move ahead.
We're already seeing
because they are able, they can
elections that they are battling.
That's very clear. That's very clear, because they are able to look at, they are able to see.
Of course.
Each of them can be able to weigh the gravity of what will happen to him or herself, so long as a comrade, like they call themselves inside, has gone ahead to rule this country. It will be very negative on top of them, looking at the status quo in which they are. It will be very bad within that party if their chairman, who doubles as president of the country, simply throws it. He has to assume responsibility in either designating within the party with his capacity as chairman, or allowing it democratically to be chosen. But then, if he allows it democratically to be chosen, then he has to assume some responsibility, which has to do with regrouping them to give that particular candidate some support. Otherwise, this country will suffer a heavier crisis than we are now.
Now, talking about the crisis, Mr. Ngendo Gibe, we saw the latest reaction from the U.S. Embassy calling on its citizens to avoid the two Anglophone regions of Cambridge between now and the 7th of March 2018. We have equally seen the UK Minister of State for Africa visit the southwest region of Cameroon, and even the British High Commissioner, where they met with some stakeholders in the southwest region of Cameroon. The message is single. It is similar. One, dialogue, inclusive dialogue, genuine dialogue. What do you have to say about this message that keeps coming time and again, and nothing is changing as far as the crisis is concerned?
Do not expect anything new from me, because international community, civil society in Cameroon, political parties in Cameroon, even within the ruling CPDM itself, had called for dialogue. But the issue here is what kind of dialogue. When I listened to the barrister Simon Munzu last time spoke to Anglophones, I was touched. I was touched because he was honest enough to recognize that solutions that have been apportioned by government towards the cries of Anglophones or Anglophone Cameroonians have been very inadequate and insufficient. Not only insufficient, that means unsufficing. It doesn't suffice to solve or to bring Anglophones to the table so that they feel Cameroonian, so that our brothers of the Francophone zone, let us be clear about it. It has come to the table that Cameroonians are of Francophone speaking and Anglophone speaking. The way it is now, we do not have to shiver when we are saying that. The government has made it in a way that Anglophones should hate Francophones, Francophones should hate Anglophones. This is something that was very trivial from the beginning, but it has degenerated into a situation where Cameroonians are described as terrorists. Cameroonians are described as secessionists. Cameroonians are described with any kind of name that only God alone can be able to describe that. But one thing is very clear here. I don't like that word secessionist. I don't like that word terrorist. I don't like that word crisis in Anglophone. What I want to say is that a crisis occurred which in the education, the legal and other sectors where Anglophones cried foul. Unfortunately, the government ruling their country has failed to understand that their cries are genuine, their cries are legal, not only national, international. It's very unfortunate to the government of this country that what Anglophones are crying is recognized by the United Nations. What Anglophones are crying is recognized by the AU. What Anglophones are crying is recognized even by the government itself that is refusing to see the problem. They know the problem, But why is it that they are not solving it? They are not attributing appropriate answers to it. That is where the problem lies. Not attributing appropriate answers is where the problem lies. We cannot cry foul. You cannot beat a child and refuse him from crying. When you beat a child, he must cry. And so refusing him from crying means double punishment.
To provide concrete solutions. Is it the government refusing to provide? Is that what you are saying? That the government is refusing to provide genuine solutions to the Anglophone crisis?
What else do you want to hear from me when the Minister of Communication calls Anglophones terrorists, calls Anglophones secessionists? When the President of the Republic himself declares Anglophone secessionists, terrorists, extremists, these are extreme words. These are hazardous words. These are exaggerating words that are used to describe people who are subjects of the same country, who are citizens of the same country. What else do you want to hear from me? When they are using these words to describe people who are Cameroonians, who have that gem of Cameroonianness in them, what else do you want from me? These are people who have bad faith and they are not ready to solve a genuine problem which is recognized not only by them, not only by the civil society, not only by the African Union, by the international organization.
Like you said, the persisting calls from the international community, international bodies, that is falling on deaf ears. What image does it present out of the national territory? What image does it, what does it tell us about the image of Cameroon, or what impact can it have on the image of Cameroon on the international scene?
It simply continues to project the kind of image we have sent to the world from the year Cameroon was classified as the highest corrupt country in the world. We must know, we have officials that are corrupt down to bone marrow. We have officials that can embezzle down to bones. We have everything in this country. Everything is possible in this country. It is very unfortunate. We live in a republic where there are several other republics. And it is the reason why the problem in the Anglophone region risks not being solved for a very long time, because there are people who feed fat from it. Around the presidency feed fat from it. If the president of this country has not become God, he has not become a superhuman, that if Cameroonians come to him and tell him that this is what is happening in the northwest and the south, this is what's happening in part of your country. You were voted by the people. This is part of what's happening in part of the country where you were voted. He will not solve it. I know very well, without mincing words, that there are people who feed fat from it, and because of that, they will do everything to maintain the present status quo. What worries me are our forces of law and order, our soldiers, our who are losing their lives there in front of people we cannot even imagine.
A lot of civilians.
And a lot of civilians. But what breaks a lot is because these people are losing their lives. These are family heads. They are losing their lives in a situation that the government within days could be able to call dialogue, open up. What do you want? Do like the situation that happened in Canada. When the Canadians from Quebec and Montreal cried in 1983, the government created a commission. They called them, sat them down. What is your problem? In our state, we don't see English before French. In our state, we don't see it. The government implemented, and Canada is the most peaceful country, one of the most peaceful, one of the most peaceful bilingual countries. When you move to Canada, where is the Prime Minister of Canada coming from today? He is Trudeau from Montreal. Okay. Let's be careful. So these are situations that are supposed to be carefully resolved, but the government has decided that repression, colonial imperialism, which colonialism ended right in the 1960s, colonial imperialism, oppression and other means can resolve, but I'm very sorry, it can turn to an ethnic crisis. An ethnic crisis is one of the worst crises in the world that is very difficult to be resolved.
Thank you, Mr. Ngindo Gibe, for joining us tonight on Talking Point. We hope to have you some other time again.
I'm glad.
Thank you so much for your time. To our viewers, it was equally a pleasure having you with us in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on Equinox Television. Wishing you a blessed stay in the company of our programs until we meet again. Goodbye.